Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
Welcome back to the High Rise, a laid-back, data-back conversation where we cover all things cannabis, from U.S. MSOs to Canadian LPs, products, and market analysis through the lens of data. My name is Cy Scott with Headset, and I'm joined as always by Emily Paxia of Poseidon.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the High Rise.
And we're recording live from Matteo Communications HQ in New York with a very special guest, Jeff Schultz, corporate attorney in the cannabis space and co-founder of Flower House, an organization that does cultivation and manufacturing. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us. Really looking forward to the chat.
Thank you for having me. I'm a longtime listener. I listen to every episode, so it's a thrill to be on today.
Right on.
Nice.
Well, it's great to have you. I know you've been connected to the New York scene for as long as I've known you. The regs first came out and probably before that. So really excited to hear from your perspective what's going on out here. It's my first time being out here since the stores have opened, so I'm excited to kind of check out, what's going on. But it'll be great to hear from you. So why don't we start with your background and how you got here and how you got into the space?
Sure. So I'm a corporate attorney by background. I've been practicing for 16 plus years. A little hard to believe it myself. Started to age myself, but I come from the hedge fund and private equity industry, and got into cannabis in 2018 in earnest. I've been consuming for decades, and I've used it really in the last 10, 12 years for chronic pain management. I have arthritis in my hip, and until I get it replaced, it's actually worked out incredibly well for me in delaying that surgery. So I've always appreciated the medical benefits of the plant, and I also just like to consume it. So I got in 2018 working in Navy Capital. I met Sean Stiefel at a networking event, and he had been looking for a general counsel. And I told him he could stop the search there because I was looking for an entryway into the cannabis industry, and it was a perfect fit, having been in-house at another hedge fund at the time. So I moved into private practice in 2020 during COVID, right when COVID started, really with a lens toward seeing New York legalize adult use. It looked like it was happening relatively soon, and I had been involved in some advocacy efforts up in Albany, and was relatively familiar with the legislation that was impending, and built a practice around that. And my practice now is split pretty evenly between representing operators and investors in the space, not just in New York, but across the country, and mostly corporate, M&A, licensing, regulatory work, and some fund formation.
Yeah, I was also excited for New York. I remember the day that I realized it was actually going to happen. It takes a lot to kind of get me freaked out these days, but I was pretty emotional when I saw that. Grew up in Buffalo, went to school at Skidmore, lived in 3 of the 5 boroughs of New York City. Love this state and think there's so much opportunity here. So I'm just really curious to hear how you decided what way you wanted to participate in the New York market.
Sure. So it's still largely a blank slate, and it's been a blank slate. I started to prepare for it more seriously, I think, during COVID, before the bill had passed, and that started with looking at retail real estate in New York City, and then looking at ag and buildings upstate. I knew that cultivation would largely be up in the Hudson Valley, or just upstate. Hudson Valley, anyone from really upstate would be offended by that, right? Since you're from upstate. So we started to look at real estate. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Initially, I was going to look at 3 retail licenses, in addition to my legal practice, which involves application writing for clients. And we identified, shortly after the bill passed, the card program was announced. And I could tell right away that trying to apply for a retail license was not going to work out unless you were going to qualify for the card program. So we were also looking at cultivation, and we identified a property and acquired a hemp license. And shortly after that, Albany passed a bill. It's getting kind of loud.
It's going to be a problem.
There's a bit of noise from some construction, but let's keep going. I don't think the mics are picking it up.
Okay, I'm not seeing. I wasn't seeing it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so we identified a property, myself and 2 partners, and acquired the property and put a hemp license on there, thinking that we would show everyone that we could grow the plant, but just without the THC in it. And a couple months after that, Albany passed a bill that grandfathered operational hemp licensees into adult use cultivation licenses. So we got grandfathered into that program and hit the ground running right away. Got plants in the ground in June of 2022. Flower House is now on the shelf in I think all of the New York City stores and most of the stores across the state. Product is moving, and it's pretty exciting to be part of that.
Those products, is it flower specifically, or are you doing other form factors?
At the moment, it's all bagged and jarred flower and pre-rolls, but we're moving into MIPS or to edibles and vapes in the next 60 days. So we'll be rolling it out pretty soon. We have to put some manufacturing resources behind that, but we're going to have a full suite of SKUs and a few more brands rolling out over the next couple months.
What product categories do you think you've seen the most excitement about from the consumers here in New York?
Good flower when you can find it, and I think we're one of the few that is offering really high-end flower because of the experience of the team, and and then it's harder to find because of the regulations with having to grow either outdoor, and that's largely for biomass and greenhouse. There's definitely not a ton of really high quality smokable flower in the legal market. The other thing that I've noticed is a real gravitation towards edibles. And I think that we're seeing that happen because New Yorkers are sick of buying nerd ropes. And, just it's like they don't know what they're buying. They're getting the smoke shop edibles, which are completely unreliable.
Those edibles are the kind they're sprayed on.
Sprayed on distillate. They're
THC,
gross. Yeah. And, they say they have 200 milligrams of THC, and they might have 10 or they might have 500, and you just don't know. So I think being able to rely on the legal market for well-tested, regulated products, edibles coming out, and beverages, I think is very much welcomed by this market.
What is the status of testing of products for the legal market at this point?
It's moving. There are more labs winning licenses. I don't know what the total count is. I think it's 15 to 20 labs, but there are a lot of labs now that are coming up. I haven't noticed any major backlogs in the last 6 to 8 weeks. It seems to be clearing up, which is really nice to see.
Good.
It's not terrible. Obviously, things should be moving faster than they are right now. They always should. Everybody wants things to move faster, but there doesn't seem to be a significant backlog in testing at the moment.
When the market opened, was testing postponed originally?
There were various iterations of how you had to go about testing. The main issue was really around THC percentage. And when the program initially launched, OCM told everybody that you could use, I think the way the language worked was you could either test it and you could put it on your label, or what you could also put on your label is what the breeder of the genetics that you're using, whatever the breeder used, the breeder gives you a range and you're allowed to put the midpoint of that range.
Interesting.
As your THC percentage. But you weren't required to put any sort of disclaimer on there that you were making that number up, and it was a complete fantasy. So at the launch of the market, there were products that were out there testing in the high 20s to mid 30s, and I think we all know that it was growing outdoors, right. Or even in a greenhouse first run in New York, that there's no way that those numbers were accurate at all. And that was exposed by a reporter, and OCM quickly pivoted away from that and stopped a lot, and they prohibited that which is great. Okay. I mean, that gets into a whole other conversation around consumer behavior and why are we stuck in this, this feedback loop of buying based on THC percentage. I don't know about you guys, but when I go to the liquor store, I don't ask for 151, nor would I pay a premium to drink it.
I did that one time, and not to drink 151, but I was making bitters. And I remember it felt very strange to ask for 151. I felt like I had to explain it just like I'm doing right now. Like, no, I'm not going to drink it. But yeah, you never ever go and buy alcohol based on the percentage for standard consumption.
Not once you're of legal age.
True,
let's be honest. Yeah. Like that goes by the wayside. Yeah.
You buy for taste and preference and brand preference, brand loyalty.
Yeah.
For many other reasons, you don't buy it for ABV. And the pricing doesn't dictate that either. Unfortunately, we're in a place in cannabis, and we have been for many years now, where THC percentage is both driving consumer behavior and is driving pricing. Which is unfortunate because, I think you guys would agree at some point there's a law of diminishing returns kicks in, and maybe when you hit around 20%, you're not getting any higher from it. You don't get more bang for your buck. And what I've seen in New York, older people buying products on the legal market, they're enjoying some of the lower THC products because they're not, they're not on Mars.
Right.
Yeah.
They're just having fun, and it's nice, and it's a nice mellow high.
Yeah, and that's probably what they remember too, right?
Correct.
When it was all lower
Correct.
dose. I think, I mean, we talk about it a lot, like the terpenes and the variety. I mean, my background in getting into this space was with Leafly, and that whole thing was this variety of different effects that you could feel, and a lot of that's driven by the balance of like the testing or the potency and the terpenes, right? But if we're just talking potency, you kind of lose some of that, right? You're just like really high. There's like no nuance to it, right? But yeah, it is a frustrating thing, and there's always opportunities, I feel like, in new markets like New York to kind of change the narrative there, right? Where it doesn't get too entrenched. So the sooner everyone can get in front of it, I think the better for the consumer, better for the brands and so on. But in most markets we've seen, it kind of just drifts that way for whatever reason.
I mean, I think you guys are the first ones to articulate what happens with the Pareto principle. And so, the folks who have higher tolerances, who are the most dedicated consumer, are buying a lot more, and they're buying a lot more at the higher potency because of the equation that they're running.
It's the 20% of consumers are buying 80% of the product.
Right. And that's the tip of the spear. So this is what I'm like, the hill I will die on is that I want to broaden the bell curve of the consumer base. And this is why I think this industry needs so much more capital, so we can invest in product innovation. We can invest in products that do have lower potency, like my friend Verena from Gossamers that calls it like brunch weed. And I think that's a really great point, because it's like not looking to get totally annihilated.
And that could be why the 80-20 rule applies, because at the moment, some people are scared of flower.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid of how high they're going to get.
Right.
If you knew that, you were not going to feel that way necessarily if you didn't consume too much of it, and you were smoking something that had 14-15%, and that you would actually just feel, you would be mellow, perhaps you would convert some of these consumers who are not the subscription flower purchasers.
Yeah.
It'd be great to see. I mean, I don't know where it begins. It certainly begins with the industry educating consumers. I don't know if it begins with the cultivator or if it begins with the bud tender. I think it's a little bit of both. But we're making an effort, and we're doing it right now. Just, I think, spreading the gospel of terpene profile and understanding there's a lot more to the plant. There's a palate, there's a taste, a smell, a flavor, a look. The bag appeal is interesting. It doesn't need to, bag appeal and THC percentage, I don't think, are a 1-to-1 correlation.
Nope.
Neither is a terpene profile. No. So I think it's incumbent upon everybody in the industry to continue to just keep pushing that, because if we don't, we're going to stay where we are with this THC percentage thing.
Yeah.
It's a little bizarre.
Steve D'Angelo a long time ago was like, terpenes are the future, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's how I buy my cannabis.
Ready for the future.
Yeah. But you're going to, what I think, what you were just talking about at the beginning here, when you're getting into the products like the gummies or edibles, I'm assuming you'll have a gummy because that's one. Okay. And so, those are entry point products for people who are canna curious, as people call it, and want to get into the space. And it's funny how pervasive that has become. I hear it all over, like it'll land in HBO shows. It's on Smartlist, that podcast that we listen to. Like, everybody makes a reference to their gummies, and I feel like I always have gummies in my fridge. I keep them in my fridge. Do you guys do that?
I do not.
I don't.
Oh.
Should I?
I don't know. For some reason, I was like, this will be better for, well, anyway.
I can't because I have children at home.
Yeah.
Unless I had a fridge that was padlocked or something.
My little tripod dog isn't opening the fridge and eating the gummies, but, that's a really good point. Child safety. Yes. Just like a liquor cabinet, everybody. We got to make the program that's socialized. Yeah. Anyway, back to you. What are some of the things you're excited about that are coming to New York? Because I know we've covered off, Sai and I have covered off of some of the challenges the state has seen, and we can get back into that. But I still think it merits, what are the things that could be really exciting in this market?
And where are we right now?
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like the earliest of early innings, right? So
Sure.
Top of the first.
Yeah. So what's kind of the lay of the land? And to Emily's question, what should we look forward to?
Sure. So there's a lot. And I think that it's become everyone's favorite pastime in this industry to just trash New York. And if you're on the ground,
we love a good bish sesh.
Everybody does, right? It's cannabis. But look, there are a lot of very positive things going on. Right? what's the state of play right now is we've issued, the state's issued 282 cultivation licenses. That number sounds like a ton, right? It's a bit of a red herring because all of those licenses are capped on their canopy, and many of them are non-operational. Right? They won the license but didn't either have the capital or the desire or the wherewithal to activate that license. So I don't think the number's it's nowhere near 282. But we have cultivation online. The supply chain is working relatively well given the very small size of the market, but things are smoothing out. It's not a complete disaster. It's really not. Things are moving. The market's working. So that's positive. There are a lot of people who I think believe that it's not working. It is. There are currently 12 operational licensed stores out of the 215 licenses that have been awarded. I believe one of those is currently temporary closed because they had a pop-up and should be reopening in some, in the following weeks or months. I'm not totally sure, but 12 is not enough. It's woefully it's crazy how few there are. But this is how we chose to launch the program and put equity first. Unfortunately, most of those people don't have the capital to get off the ground. They don't have the real estate. And we've had some issues with DASNY being funded. I think it's pretty well documented at this point. So there is some good news on that front. DASNY recently amended their limited partnership agreement for the fund, for the Social Equity Impact Fund, to allow for a unnamed debt investor or group of debt investors to come in and fund the balance of the $150 million. $50 million came from taxpayer money. The other $150 looks to be imminent. There's no other reason why they would hold a board meeting over it and why they would amend their fund documents to allow for debt to come into the vehicle. So clearly they are anticipating some or all of the DASNY fund being funded. That is phenomenal news.
For those that aren't maybe familiar with New York and DASNY was set up to fund these initial license holders from the CAURD, or do you call it CARD here? Is that
CARD is the common parlance for the social equity retail licenses, the first 300 licenses to be granted. DASNY itself, it's an interesting distinction because this came up at a board meeting recently when I was listening to it, and I sort of laughed to myself. DASNY itself is the dormitory authority of the state of New York. They have a subsidiary affiliate business that is helping manage this fund in conjunction with a private fund manager. And that fund is raising capital to deploy to the CARD licensees to secure their real estate, do their build-out, as little or as much as those CARD licensees would like. They'll do the full build-out. They'll buy their terminals for them. They set up their back office for them. They help them with HR and hiring, really wraparound management services that's offered by either DASNY or private vendors. Right? It's all working in conjunction. And the idea behind that is if you win the license and you don't have the capital or the experience to run an adult use dispensary, you haven't done it before, they're really propping them up and helping them. And that is the goal. So up until 2 weeks ago, that fund had $50 million in taxpayer money in it with the goal of raising 200. That 150 was nowhere to be found. And then the great news in the last couple of weeks has been it looks like the money's there. Or not that the money's there, but the money is on its way. That was a very big signal that that's happening. It was huge news.
And the change is that they're allowed to deploy it in a debt structure rather than an equity structure?
So they were always, that fund was always going to loan money to the CARD licensees. It was that they were raising it in a VC vehicle for, to raise money for LPs. Now they have apparently one LP, as far as I know. Maybe there's a couple that are, they're equity holders in the fund, but the fund itself is going to borrow money now.
Okay, got it.
And then in turn lend it back out.
Okay, whoa.
So
Okay. Interesting.
At I think around 13, levered up. Roughly around 13% is what I understand, secured by the leases. It's a franchise model.
Yeah. Okay.
So we'll see how it goes. I mean, I think everybody's well intentioned here.
Yeah.
Really, everybody is well intentioned. But stores will fail, and I think that jury's out until people are going to judge this program, not based on completely on the success of it and the deployment of that capital. But what happens when somebody fails? And I don't think anyone wants to deal with that one yet.
No.
But we want to get these stores open first and make sure that they are sustainable, that they get the doors open, and that they're capable of selling adult use product at the rate that they should be. And that capital is going to go a long way. $200 million is a nice chunk of change. It's not going to fund the entire program. But not everyone needs the money, and that's another good thing. I can tell you as someone who is on the ground, involved in this every single day, 7 days a week, there are plenty of card licensees that have won these licenses. They don't need the money. They don't need the real estate. They are independently wealthy. And not everyone that won has nothing. There are a lot of people out there that have capital. In addition to that, there are a lot of people who are not blocked out by the regulations, which we can get into, and are capable of and willing to investing in non-predatory fashions to partner effectively with these card licensees with real estate and cash, and to get these guys open. Those stores are opening. The good news is that we don't see it yet, but there's another 30 that I'm aware of. I call it 30. It might be 25. It might be 40 licensees that are actively involved in getting their stores open right now, and they're all saying they're going to open and call it before Labor Day. Right? I think 30 is aggressive. Maybe if we get another 15 to 20 open before Labor Day, that would be great. There is a ton of activity going on behind the scenes. People securing their properties. They're doing their build-outs. Some of them are still raising capital if they're not using DASNY. And those stores are on their way.
That's good to hear. Yeah, that's what we need.
It is really good. We've hit the point where we're very much in the real estate race.
Yes.
Which happens everywhere. It's sure unavoidable.
Yeah.
But it has fully happened. There's a 1,000-foot buffer zone currently in place. I believe, although I have no indication that this is going to happen, I think they're going to eventually drop that buffer zone in maybe a year or two back to 500 feet. But right now, a 1,000-foot buffer zone really only allows for roughly 30 stores in Manhattan, for example, which is less than the 44 that they're going to give out. And that would assume perfectly efficient spacing, which we know is not the case. No. Because there are very limited landlords that are willing to and open to taking leases on these spaces. But they're getting them. There are a couple dozen that have already signed leases. They're just not open yet. Right. So it's really good news.
That is good news. Yeah. We'll take that.
And there's, and again, people love to trash the regulator for making things overly restrictive. I have, plenty of feedback on some of those rules, but at the same time, they're also, and they don't get enough credit for this, engaging in some very liberalized activity, right? There is a proposal right now to open farm stands. Now, you guys have been in the industry a long time. You probably feel the same way I do. I've always looked at the idea of selling weed at a farm stand as a total fantasy, pipe dream fantasy. It's something you joke about. And when I read the proposal for the first time, I was mentioned to you guys earlier, I giggled too. I'm like, oh, there's no way we're doing farm stands. There's no way, right? I think it's happening. It looks like it's going to happen. I don't know when this is going to air, but things are moving really fast in New York. It looks like it is much more likely than not that we end up with farm stands where a card licensee will effectively run off-site in a non-retail location, run a farm stand. It's not going to be a physical farm stand, I don't believe. I think the details are nebulous. We haven't learned of all the rules and the regulations around it, but roughly you have one card winner, one card licensee, and a minimum of 3 cultivation licensees that can pull together and create a farm stand license where you can temporarily sell your cannabis.
That is great. It is really moving more to a direct-to-consumer model, and we always say that I don't think we have a supply-demand issue in cannabis. I think the demand is there. It's an access issue, and we just have to become better at finding those access points.
California only has 800 legal stores, and it's way too few. Imagine in a state with 19 million people, we have 12 stores open. Access is the problem. The demand is obviously there. We have, who knows what the number is, if it's 1,500 or 4,000 smoke shops. The demand is obviously there. And those guys are printing money to the point where the fines that are being levied on them is just a tax. So clearly they're doing well enough to afford that 10, 20 grand here and there, having their products seized. They open right back up. I think the biggest problem that we're seeing in this market is the proliferation of the smoke shop, and then the second order effect is the consumer confusion around it.
Yes.
Because some of the card licensees that have won, have opened what are effectively pop-ups for now. They were hastily built out to get up and running. They're not fully built, and some of these smoke shops are beautiful. Clearly they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the build out. They're very nice. And I have had this experience where people who don't work in the industry but consume have come up to me and said, I went into the legal store and I was a little confused by the product selection. It looked like it was coming from California. And then I went into the trap shop, the smoke shop, and it had all this unique product I'd never seen before that had all these labels, and products were more expensive. I said, no, you got it reversed.
Backwards. Yeah.
The store that you thought was the smoke shop was actually the legal one. It's just a pop-up. But that beautiful store, because there is no enforcement, there's no real threat of enforcement at this point, and no real enforcement, that those stores have the money and the bravado to open and operate and advertise it. And it's cancer on this market.
And by the way, that's what a company that doesn't have 280E and can accept credit cards, that's what a profitability profile looks like of a business like that.
That's the future for the legal industry,
yeah.
I would hope.
Yes, actually, it's a perfect case to state for what these businesses could look like if we took away those things.
They're crushing it.
Yeah.
They're crushing it. And I don't know if they're paying taxes, but they're clearly not subject to any of the rules and regulations that we are. I think one of the reasons, there's a lot of reasons I think that we're not seeing them shut down yet, and I hope that ends. We need to heal from the war on drugs and the disproportionate impact it had on a lot of communities here in New York. The issue that I think there's a nuance here. We spoke about this earlier, and I talk about this every day. The people who are opening and have opened these smoke shops, by and large, are opportunists. They're carpetbaggers who were not operational until cannabis was decriminalized in New York in 2021.
Correct.
There is the legacy market, and then there are the smoke shops, and those are two distinct groups. No one is going to convince me otherwise. I know who they are, and I know what the real legacy market is, and I know who those people are, and they're either operating quietly in the shadows, and they have been, or they are transitioning to the legal market, which is even more upsetting to see people play by the rules and kind of being put to the back of the line. Whereas these smoke shops have opened up, largely not owned by African Americans, so there is some concern over arresting minorities over selling cannabis illegally. That's not, I think, as big of a concern as maybe people think, because the people operating these stores are not necessarily the same communities that were targeted during the war on drugs. No. So it's a nuance that I think everyone should be aware of, and they need to be shut down.
Are they trying to shut them down actively? You mentioned seizures and fines. Is that the extent of it, or is there more aggressive enforcement?
So far, we've only seen seizure of product and some cash, some minor arrests, I think, of mostly store employees, which is not effective. It has to be the proprietors of these operations. And we haven't seen much of the way in enforcement at all. I think that they're, and this isn't because necessarily OCM or the state generally or the city don't want to do it. They don't have the resources. And it's I think that anyone that's quick to point a finger at the regulator should think twice about why they're doing that. Right? Is it really the regulator, or are they understaffed and underfunded? And it's incumbent upon our lawmakers to give them the proper budget to take care of this problem. They don't have enough people to do this. They went into Weed World, I heard, on 420, one of the Weed World locations, spent the entire day there. I think there were a significant number of enforcement folks there. I don't know how much product they took, but that place was open again a week later. And amazing. They didn't padlock doors. They didn't do what they did in Toronto. Remember, they put up cement barriers in front of it. Okay, do that. And what I've been pushing for, and I've been advocating very loudly for a while now, is landlord liability.
I agree with you. Yes.
Just go at it. You couldn't open a unlicensed liquor shop, or you couldn't open a bar that didn't have a liquor license in New York. You'd be shut down in 2 seconds, and the landlord would have liability there too. And it's not very difficult. The diligence threshold is, do you have a pulse? Did you check if this person had a license? It's not very difficult.
No.
So if they don't have a license and you're collecting money, that is those are ill-gotten gains. That is laundered money, and I don't think there's a ton of sympathy for some of these landlords, and it avoids the actual issue and the optics of law enforcement going after people who are running these stores and selling cannabis in a nonviolent fashion. So I'm hopeful that the city implements, that they amend their municipal code here to allow for it. It appears that the state is already in line with this, and a bill, the governor introduced a bill that was passed that really gave more teeth to enforcement, both law enforcement, tax authority, and OCM. But I think they also need to staff them up and have more people on the ground here. But they have to shut these down. the whole point of this program is to lift up people who have been harmed by the disproportionate impact of the war on drugs. Those people can't win. We can't meet that goal. It's on the first page of the MRTA. How are we going to accomplish the primary goal of that piece of legislation without shutting down the people that are not following the rules at all, not even trying?
Is
Right.
it like a New York City problem, or is it a statewide problem?
It's both.
Both.
It's both.
I mean,
But
I hear
it's-
about it in Buffalo. Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
But New York City, I mean, you guys see it. They're on
bonkers.
every corner.
Yeah.
And there's no height. No one cares. It's. I'm seeing store openings announcing with DJs and
Yes.
parties and
Grand
and
openings.
Grand openings for illegal smoke shops. Not only is it's offensive to anybody, it's like I shake my head all the time. Not only are they doing that, but consumers in New York think that that's a legal store.
Yeah.
Why else would they have a grand opening,
Yeah.
throwing a huge party?
Right.
So it's now beginning to confuse consumers, which puts OCM at a further disadvantage in
Yes.
educating the market, which they've gone to great lengths already to try to educate the community. Now their job is even harder, right? Because now you have to educate consumers on, are you going to the right store or not?
Right.
And it's the sticker on the door isn't enough.
No.
It's not like that.
No.
It's just you got to shut them down.
Yes.
So I hope that they do that, because the people who have been awarded these licenses deserve a fair chance. Right now, it's not fair to them.
It's not.
And it's not accomplishing the legislative goals.
Yeah.
I think with the stores opening, like you mentioned, going from, what are we, 14 right now, 12, 14,
Yep.
Yep.
to this 30, 40, whatever it may be in a short period of time, I think it will hopefully create more urgency around this. I mean, there's just going to be more that are subject to this dynamic, right? So you're going to get a lot of more voices, complaining like it's not a level playing field.
Correct.
Like we all see it. Obviously, the operators that are operating now see it, but as more and more people come to legal channel, hopefully that will raise the profile even more, and somehow they are able to take care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so, and I hope it doesn't take. I hope it doesn't get to the point where it takes some sort of catastrophic event
Yes.
to wake everyone up here. Someone buying a product at one of these stores that harms somebody. We're also, we're seeing that they're not carding everyone, that people under the age of 21 are able to purchase cannabis at these smoke shops. This is not good public policy.
No.
And it has to end. And then you have, it's become, it's just become so blatant, right? There's a store opening. It's somebody's flagship Soho store that is opening, I think, their 5th or 6th illegal dispensary. They're advertising it all over the place that they're opening in Soho on Broadway. And I believe right across the street, at least one card licensee has secured a location directly across the street. So not only we have all these issues, but also remember, if that card licensee that's opening across the street is taking money from DASNY, they're taking money from New York taxpayers.
Right.
That $50 million was funded by the state budget, and that's our tax revenue, and that's money that we have paid to the state in taxes. We now have to compete to get that money back with people who didn't bother to even try to get a license.
Great way to put it.
It is not good for as a taxpayer in New York, that upsets me. I want to be able to see a return on that money, or at least be able to get it back.
Right.
And that money's now completely at risk.
No, it's an excellent point, because it's just not fair competition. And you just articulated something which I think is like my big fear, having lived through VapeGate. Like, we just do not need another moment where there's consumer confusion and something that is not lab tested going through the regulated market gets into the hands of someone. And, the data that comes out of the legal markets where the carding behaviors, it's amazing the rate of success of selling to only over 21, because none of these so when you go through all of that process to get a license, you'll be damned if you're going to blow it on letting someone under 21 into your store. It's like far too it's like efficacious.
Speaking of that issue,
Yeah.
and I had to put my foot in my mouth because I raised this issue at a municipal opt-out hearing, and I'll just be crow for this for a while, but I said it's not going to be like liquor stores where if you're under the age of 21 you can walk in. Liquor store, you can walk in, you just can't purchase anything if you're under 21. And I said there's no precedent for that being the case. And New York, lo and behold, in the regulations, allows you to enter the store if you're under the age of 21. You just can't get in line and buy a product. Now, if you're with your if you're with someone who's under the age of 21 and they, verbally indicate that they are interested in maybe a gummy or a product, then you have to probably refuse that sale. But you are allowed in the store if you're under the age of 21. And I'm not aware of any, there probably is somewhere, but I'm not aware of another state where you're allowed into an adult use store under the age of 21.
No.
And they do that for public safety. There are single parents who want to buy cannabis products, and I think this is the reason for it, right? You have single parents or someone who is with a child, and they would like to buy cannabis products. They don't want to have to leave their child in the car or on the street somewhere while they go in and shop. They may not have an alternative.
I've seen that. I mean, I've seen, not here, but in other markets where kids are in a car outside.
Waiting outside?
Yeah, waiting
Sweet.
outside.
Jeez.
And this is, so it's actually, it's much more liberal than I'd ever seen, a policy like this, but for good reason. You don't want that. You don't want to have to leave a kid outside.
Right.
Of course, we can always argue that the need for going to purchase that product at that moment in time may not be there, but the reality is, why stop them?
Right. And I think with the stigma too, like when markets, like early markets, like Washington State is a good example, like signage was like a postage stamp, windows you couldn't see in. It looked like some bad stuff was going down in there, right? So if I was a kid, I'd be like, what is happening in there? And it just, compounds the stigma.
Correct.
Versus like, you walk into a grocery, like in a lot of states, will sell liquor and beer and wine, and it's just around.
It's in the window.
Right, it's in the window, and
Right next to the
maybe
cigarettes.
it doesn't, just stigmatize it as much, where it's this like, I always talk about this like radioactive thing, like you get too close to it. Obviously, you don't want to encourage, like,
No, but the reason why we, I think a lot of younger, I was in high school once too, like everybody else, and younger people tend to gravitate towards things that may be taboo and want to do something that's naughty once in a while. So if it's normalized, it's not cool anymore.
Right.
I don't think that my children, their generation, is going to grow up thinking it's cool.
Because
their dad does it.
They don't think it's cool. Lame because I'm involved in it. Right?
Correct.
They're just.
It's automatically lame because daddy's in the business.
Right.
There's no question. Like I'm
Boring.
getting to get that feeling right now. Right, that my daughter's in 5th grade. She's 11. I think she probably thinks it's not cool.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the data shows that too in the markets where it's legal, that the underage use is, it's like going down. So this is all good. This is all the proof points that it works. I actually just sent this out to my investors the other day because someone read Kevin Sabat's opinion piece in Newsweek. And I was like, I can't believe I still have to slap this guy around in my newsletters, but I'll do it all day happily. But, so we've got the exciting news of the farmers market. I couldn't agree with you more. I think you just laid out some really pragmatic and important pieces around the like trap shop, vape shops that exist, and I always try to disabuse people of the notion that it's legacy because it's not. I mean, we know where to find legacy operators, and I think we all have an affection for them in many ways as the real founders of this space, but. This is not that, and it's important.
The people I have the most sympathy for right now at this stage in the game in New York are the legacy operators who actively and consciously chose to stop doing what they were doing in order to win a license.
Yes.
And some have won, some are ready to apply, and they're watching this thing go on, and they chose to do, really do the right thing and play by the rules and stop doing whatever it is that they're doing. And here they are, some of them are waiting on licenses, some of them are waiting on, capital.
Yep.
So it's tough to watch that happen, and that's the that to me is the most upsetting thing, right? It's a lot of there are a lot of legacy people here.
Yeah. That's a story we've seen before too in California. But go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, just I guess as we close out, like, what do you think this looks like if we were to sit down a year from now?
Yeah.
Or maybe 2 years. I don't know. What do you? Any predictions? Like,
and also sorry, but just also where do the ROs or the MSOs fit into that picture like a year from now? Because I know I know these things are on very different ends of the spectrum in terms of how people view this market, but I personally believe there's an ecosystem that can exist side by side. And to your point, we've said this too, is like I would have rather seen the already resourced MSOs being the ones standing up the shops in terms of like kind of educating the market, fighting, like kind of bringing people into legal stores versus the confusion around this. But now the burden is on the card operators to get that fight done. But what do you think in a year?
Well, look, it's also, there's a lot around the RO. There's a lot to unpack about the RO dynamic here, and we could probably do.
It's the MSO. It stands for.
It's a registered organization. So they're the 10 medical operators. There's now 11. I think that number is going to 15 or 16. So let's talk 12 months from now, because in cannabis, that's, I believe, 7 years.
It is.
Real life. So 12 months from now, obviously I have no crystal ball, but it's everybody's favorite, question. What does the future look like in any context in cannabis? So I think what we'll see in 12 months is we're going to actually see at least one retail location co-located for all of the ROs, whether they will be in the cultivation manufacturing side, TBD. I don't think that even if they were allowed to, it would necessarily be a wise decision to rush into this market with 12 stores open. I think because of the fees that they have to pay and the CapEx involved in the build out, when we all know that every MSO and the 10 that are in New York, they have limited capital and they have to pick and choose where they're deploying into which markets. There's some very sexy markets where demand is massive and there's an outlet to sell. New York really isn't one of them yet. It's not there with 12 stores, even with 50. It's not enough for one of these MSOs to really scale out their business. Keep in mind their retail location, so they can be vertical, but their first store can't open until really December 31st is when they have to pick it by. And then the second store, I believe, is 6 months later, and then another one in a year. They have to pay significant fees into the program. Some of those fees have been deferred, but it's still real money and a tremendous amount of CapEx on the build-out. The cultivation manufacturing is not well scaled in New York yet. There hasn't been a reason to. I think PharmaCann's built out. They're pretty scaled, but it's pretty limited. So you're looking at, I don't know, $20, $30 million to do a full-scale build-out. When are you getting the return on that capital? Should it be used elsewhere? And you can get the money back faster. Where's the right place to spend your limited resources right now? It's not a well-financed industry. So I think even if they're allowed to build that out, I'm not sure that they're going to choose to do it anytime soon. I think that there's not many places to sell it. Plus, you have 282 cultivators that are, however many there are, even if there's 100 of them that are operational and selling product in the market, there's real competition. And the stores are only allowed to carry 30% of their own product, the ROs. So when the ROs open their that first co-located store of medical and adult use, 30% of anything they produce is allowed to be on their own shelf. 70% has to come from third-party cultivators and manufacturers. So it's not really truly fully vertical, but it is better than what was initially proposed in the regs.
Yeah.
I also think we'll see, I think we get to 50 stores. I would like to believe that. Hopefully the DASNY fund will be funded and they will be deploying that capital rapidly. I think they're prepared to do that. We're seeing quick response times from OCM on site selections and approvals. Like, we're seeing things move fast on the ground. Things you don't hear about in the media, certainly not that you're reading on Twitter. They're being very responsive. They know they need to get these stores open. Everyone wants to get this running. So I think we see some real stores and brands begin to, people are going to start to recognize them.
Well, I feel like we just got our finger on the pulse here. What do you think, Cy?
Yeah, it was killer. I think we have to come back a year from now, too, just to see how it's all shaken out.
Yeah.
Well, a year from now in cannabis is like Labor Day.
I feel old already.
But it's exciting. I think that, I think that we'll see real stores open and some really cool stories. And it'll finally be, hopefully a year from now, some of those stories will actually be told and well known. When you look at a store like, take Union Square Travel Agency, that is 51% owned by a 501c3. That's, it's amazing. And there's signs in the store that show it. And I remember taking a picture of it the day that it opened. And I said, this is what this program is about. This is really what the intention was. You kind of even cut out the middleman with the 501c3s. 51% of that store is owned by a charitable organization. And the money is going directly to them. It doesn't pass through a store owner or 5 different levels. It's going right to them.
Amazing.
And that is the impact that this program is going to have. And hopefully a lot of the justice-involved individuals will get up and running and make a fortune. I'm very hopeful that it won't be everyone, but some of them are going to make a tremendous amount of money. And it's very inspiring to see it being built from the ground up and seeing the opportunity for them. I just hope that it does come to fruition. It's not going to be perfect, but some people are going to make a lot of money that really deserve it.
I hope so.
Nice.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Really great to have you on, and we'll have to do this again and just keep
Absolutely.
track of the progress here.
Anytime. You know where to find me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.